Hello everyone, I'm Heather. This is Heather Travels. This channel is all about cruising and travel. If you're interested in travel content, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you don't miss any notifications of my upcoming videos. In today's video, which I'm filming today from a local park near where I live in the fall of 2022. This video may not go up for a while, but this happens to be when I'm filming it. There may be a few dog walkers or families walking by in the background. In this video, I want to talk to you about something pretty cool and exciting that our family got to do in 2022. Now, I know that a lot of other travel content creators probably do this all the time and it's not a big deal for them. But for us, this was pretty significant and exciting, and it's probably something that most families won't ever get to do, really. But I wanted to talk to you about it because I think it gives a good opportunity for some helpful information if you're a Disney fan. Okay, so in 2022, we got to visit Disneyland in California, Walt Disney World in Florida twice, and take a Disney cruise on Disney Cruise Line's Disney Wonder. So that's some pretty extensive Disney traveling that we did. Now, I still haven't been to any of the international Disney theme parks. I would definitely like to for sure visit Disneyland Paris at some point, and we would definitely like to go to Tokyo Disneyland and Tokyo Disney Sea. Both of those probably will happen at some point because we would like to definitely get back to Europe before too long. And Megan has a great interest in Japanese language and culture. She studies Japanese and probably will do a study abroad in Japan if Japan allows it and they're doing, letting more visitors in at that point and stuff too. So at some point we'll probably get to go to both of those parks. I'm not sure how important it is to me ever to visit the other Asia Disney parks, Hong Kong Disney and Shanghai Disney. Tell me your thoughts about that in the comments below if you have an interest in visiting the parks in China. Since we had the opportunity to visit Disneyland, Walt Disney World, and Disney Cruise Line all in one year, it gives me the unique opportunity to compare the experiences. Now, I have done all of these things before, multiple times. I've just never done them so close together before. So the fact that we did them all together in a matter of, really it was less than 10 months, really gives me a unique perspective to have them fresh in my mind and be able to tell you about them. So what I want to tell you today is kind of a general overview of what you can expect about each of these experiences so that you can compare them with each other, help you decide which one might be the best choice for you. I'm going to talk to you about who I think each one is best for and who might want to choose one of the other options, okay? So obviously this is mostly going to be relevant for Americans, since these are the destinations that are most accessible to Americans. However, I do know from my experience visiting Disneyland in the past, a lot of Asian tourists, Canadians, people from Mexico also like to visit Disneyland frequently, and a lot of Europeans and people from the UK definitely like to come over to Walt Disney World, as well as people from all over in other parts of the world too. So, and Disney Cruise Line is expanding all the time. Coming up in 2023, they're going to be taking a ship to the South Pacific, to Australia, New Zealand. So that's very exciting. They do have for many, many years taken the Disney Magic over to Europe. In 2023, they're going to be switching that up and they're going to be sending the Dream over to Europe. But I mean, there is opportunity for people from other parts of the world to experience these three Disney travel experiences. But I do recognize that this is mostly going to be geared for people in North America. Okay, first one that we went to in 2022 was Disneyland. We went to Disneyland in January, which was a fabulous time to go because we live in Wisconsin and it's very, very cold here in January and there's lots of snow. We like getting out of Wisconsin in January or in the winter in general, but definitely in January, because in January you have kind of that post-Christmas depression slump kind of thing going on, and you also, it just can get kind of miserable. January can stretch on, feel very long, it's very dark. So it was really nice to get out of town and go fly to Southern California and go to Los Angeles and Disneyland. Now, if you haven't seen those videos, I will link one of the playlists up here We did spend some significant time in the greater Los Angeles area doing other things before we went to Disneyland. So we went to Warner Brothers Studios, we went to Griffith Park, we have a couple of hotel tours on there, we went to the beach, we went to the Getty Center, lots of stuff. So be sure that you check out those two playlists. I have them divided up, one for the Los Angeles part and one for the Disneyland part. The purpose of that trip was to celebrate Megan, my daughter's graduation from high school. She graduated early. She worked very hard and graduated in January of 2022. And so this was a celebratory trip to celebrate her graduation. And we also actually had her senior portraits taken by PhotoPass photographers at Disneyland, which was really cool. Disneyland is Walt Disney's original theme park, opened in 1955, and is really kind of started, at least, as more of a locals theme park. And even today, it's really more visited by people that are closer to it. It's significantly smaller than Walt Disney World. Disneyland only has two parks. It has Disneyland Park and Disney California Adventure, whereas Walt Disney World has 4 theme parks: Magic Kingdom, Epcot, Disney's Hollywood Studios, and Animal Kingdom. And then there are 2 water parks, there's golf courses, there's over 25 resort hotels. They each have a shopping and dining district. At Disneyland, it's significantly smaller and it's still known as Downtown Disney. At Walt Disney World, it's been reimagined as Disney Springs, and it's significantly larger. But they both is a collection of restaurants, shopping, a little bit of entertainment. They're similar in that they both have that. They both have theme parks, but size-wise, they're dramatically different. Disneyland is very, very much smaller than Walt Disney World in Florida. So you're going to get a lot more locals visiting Disneyland and people just from the southwestern United States in general visiting Disneyland than you are at Walt Disney World. One plus to this, although I'm not sure how much this is true, is, at least it used to be, that Disneyland was a little bit more reliable for avoiding really crowded days. Although this didn't necessarily seem to be true when we were there in January and school should have been in session. I do still think, though, that you will see Disneyland be dependably much more busy on weekends than weekdays. Whereas at Walt Disney World, basically just every day is busy. People who visit Walt Disney World, for the most part, are there for a longer term vacation. They're there for a longer extended period of time than people who visit Disneyland, and it's more of a vacation for them, and so the day of the week doesn't necessarily matter. Disneyland is easier to accomplish, if you will, everything in a shorter amount of time than Walt Disney World because it's only 2 parks. However, you definitely really do need more than one day at Disneyland Park because Disneyland Park is just dense with rides. There are so many attractions in Disneyland Park, and especially since they added Star Wars Galaxy's Edge there too, it's really, really heavy with rides and attractions. Every time you turn a corner, you're like, oh my gosh, there's that. Oh, there's that. Oh, I forgot about that. And they have a lot of things that they don't have at Walt Disney World. So not everything is a duplicate. There are some things that you will only find at Disneyland in California. There are some things that you will only find at Walt Disney World in Florida. So depending on if some of that is important to you, might help you choose one over the other. For example, Cars Land, the extremely well-themed land in Disney California Adventure that is based on the movie Cars, is only found at Disney California Adventure in California. Animal Kingdom, the theme park which is focused on animals and conservation, is only found at Walt Disney World in Florida. And there's a lot of things like that. There's some crossover, but still pretty significant differences too, that they are very different experiences. A couple things that I think that set Disneyland apart and make it a little bit easier to visit, if you will, are I think that Disneyland still, even though they're going to be implementing Magic Band Plus there soon, I still think Disneyland is a little easier to do spur of the moment or last minute or with less planning. There's much fewer restaurants that require reservations at Disneyland than there are at Walt Disney World. There's a lot more emphasis on quick service dining at Disneyland. I mean, there are some restaurants where you can make reservations, but not nearly as many as at Walt Disney World in Florida. So it can be easier just to go and wander around and not have to have a plan. You can still use Disney Genie Plus and all of that if you want to, but you don't have to. I mean, you don't have to do that at Walt Disney World either. But it can be easier just to like go and figure out what you're going to eat and, you know, and things like that. The other thing that I really like at Disneyland is the presence of characters. There are so many more characters around at Disneyland in California than there are at Walt Disney World, and they're much more approachable and easier to run into. They tend to be just kind of all over the place, all over the park, and are easier to see. Walt Disney World, to see characters, you really almost always have to either have a character dining reservation or you have to wait in some kind of line because the character is inside someplace and there's a queue to meet them and have time with them and get your autograph and photos and stuff like that. So if you're looking for a more relaxed, less intense, and classic Disney experience, then I would recommend Disneyland. I would also recommend Disneyland for families with small children. I think that small children would actually, you know, like infants, toddlers, preschool age, will actually enjoy Disneyland more than they will enjoy Walt Disney World in general. So if you have small children, I would recommend you check out going to Disneyland. Walt Disney World, as I mentioned, is more of a big vacation destination. Millions of people visit Walt Disney World in Florida from all over the world every year. It's a very, very big place. It's very extensive. It has, like I said, 4 theme parks, 2 water parks, 2 mini golf courses, dozens of resort hotels. It's a big vacation destination. You can stay there and really be immersed in the Disney bubble for the entire time that you're there. There are people who come to Disney World in Florida and stay there for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you know, and you could still not do or see everything that's there. So it's just a completely kind of different experience. Like I already mentioned, there's some different things at Walt Disney World that you won't find at Disneyland. One other thing I want to talk about is the difference in the weather. We visited Disney World this past year, or in 2022, we visited in July and we visited in November at Thanksgiving time. The weather is going to be very different. Now that's something about Disneyland too. The weather at Disneyland in California is going to be pretty consistent. It's going to be sunny and nice and dry pretty much anytime you go to Disneyland in California. Well, Disney World in Florida, the months between, I would say, April and the end of October, or even into November, it's going to be very, very hot. Not all the time, but for the most part, it's going to be very, very hot and humid, and you're going to be dealing with the possibility of a lot of rain. So that's something to consider when choosing between the two as well. There can be a great variation in temperature at Walt Disney World in Florida from one month to the next. If you go there in January, we've done this, it can actually get really cold. We've gone to Walt Disney World before where we ended up having to go into a shop and buy jackets or coats or sweatshirts because we were so cold. And then when we went in July, it was very, very, very hot. So there's a lot of fluctuation in temperature at Walt Disney World. So that's something to consider. I think you have to be more mindful of choosing the time of year that you visit Walt Disney World than you do when you visit Disneyland. Walt Disney World is also really great for foodies. There's a really big restaurant scene going on at Walt Disney World. There is a large variety of dining options at Walt Disney World. If you're a foodie, you probably would greatly prefer Walt Disney World over Disneyland. The other people I would say that I would recommend for Walt Disney World, you gotta be pretty hardy. Okay, it's a exhausting experience to visit Walt Disney World. You either have to break it up into smaller, more frequent trips, or you've got to allow yourself a lot of time and breaks in between to rest because it's so much. And the parks are bigger, there's a lot more walking, there's a lot more transportation things involved, whereas Disneyland is such a small footprint, you can really just come there and it's all right together and it's not really a big deal to get around at all. I really almost feel like between the two, I mean, adults who are Disney fans are going to enjoy either one, but I feel like between the two, you're actually probably going to see more adults only at Walt Disney World than you do at Disneyland. And I would actually really recommend Walt Disney World for older kids. So I would say like upper elementary and up. I just recently read an article by a man who wrote that he took his 3-year-old and 6-year-old to Walt Disney World in Florida, and they hated it. They were overstimulated, they were exhausted, they were scared of the rides. And that's one of the reasons I say I really do think that if you have little kids, younger kids, Disneyland is probably a better choice. But if you have a multi-generational family and the youngest person in your family, is in middle school or something like that, then you'll probably enjoy Walt Disney World more. Also, there's a lot of really like teenage and adult-oriented stuff going on at Walt Disney World that little kids wouldn't necessarily appreciate that much. Also, with the exception of California Screamin', the roller coaster at Disney California Adventure, Disneyland in California really doesn't have what I would call thrill rides. But Walt Disney World still doesn't have a ton of thrill rides, but they have more. So hopefully that kind of helps you understand the differences between Walt Disney World and Disneyland and what they're good for, who they're good for. Now let's throw Disney Cruise Line into the mix. Okay, a Disney cruise is a very different experience than going to the theme parks. You still definitely want to be a fan of Disney and know your Disney. Recently, Gary Bembridge from Tips for Travelers went on Disney Cruise Line because even though it's not his cup of tea and he knew it wasn't going to be, he did it anyway because he wanted to document the experience and learn about it firsthand for his viewers, because he said it was the most requested cruise line that he hadn't tried yet that his viewers wanted him to try. And he definitely had some good insights and perspectives after he took a Disney Magic Norwegian Fjords cruise. He pointed out, and I'm going to be talking about this in another video coming up, that there's a misunderstanding that Disney Cruise Line and the Disney theme parks really are only for children. And I really don't think that's true. And that's something that Gary pointed out. It's not that they're for children. It's that they're for people who like Disney. So you really do want to like Disney. It's not that you can't enjoy a Disney cruise if you're not a Disney fan. But what Gary pointed out in his videos was that if you don't know the Disney stuff, you're going to miss out on a lot. You're not going to get the full experience because you're not going to understand who the characters are. What is this story? What's happening here? Why is this like this? It's still a very nice cruise line, but it's not the traditional cruise experience like other cruise lines. You should not expect your experience on Disney Cruise Line to be the same as your experience at the Disney theme parks. It's not anything like that. There's no rides. I mean, you might have a couple of water slides, but you're not going to be walking miles and miles and miles a day. I mean, unless you take some really extensive shore excursion, you could, walk laps around the ship on the promenade deck, I suppose. But it's going to be a much more relaxed, of the three, the Disney Cruise Line experience is going to be your most relaxed and probably the one that will most feel like a vacation. It's also going to probably be the most all-inclusive of the three. None of them are going to be completely all-inclusive. And there are ways that you can make visiting a Disney theme park more inclusive, like paying for things in advance. Although one of those was the Disney dining plan, and they got rid of that with the beginning of the pandemic and haven't brought it back as of the day I'm filming this. Of the three, Disney Cruise Line is going to be your most all-inclusive. I mean, even soda and drinks and everything, not alcohol, but are included on Disney Cruise Line, which they're not on most other cruise lines. You can prepay your gratuities, so you don't have, you really could go on a Disney cruise and have paid for everything ahead of time and not have to pay for anything on the ship. That is possible. You do, though, have to like cruising. It's a cruise. It's not a theme park. You have to be okay with being on a ship. You have to be okay with the fact that you're at sea. There's ways to manage seasickness, but depending on the itinerary and, which ship you're on, the Magic and the Wonder are older and smaller. You're going to feel the motion a little bit more on those than you are on the newer, bigger ships. If you have seasickness, if you suffer from seasickness, you might need to take some extra steps to be prepared for that. However, one thing that is similar, and I think almost even better on Disney Cruise Line than the parks, is the entertainment. They really make it a fully immersive entertainment experience. The kids clubs are themed so well. The ships are so lovely. The whole thing is kind of an entertainment experience from the time even that you walk into the cruise terminal until you step off the ship at the end of the cruise. Whereas a lot of reality can kind of creep into your experience when you're at Disneyland or Walt Disney World. But it can be even easier to be in that Disney bubble when you're on a Disney Cruise Line than when you're visiting the theme parks. So if you want the most sheltered, I guess if you will, experience where reality of the real world isn't going to encroach on your experience, then Disney Cruise Line is probably your best choice. Who is Disney Cruise Line best for? Obviously people who like cruising, people who like Disney. I've taken on Disney Cruise Line my kids when they were every age under the sun, from 5 months old, which you can't even do anymore, to 4 years old, 7 years old, teenagers, adults. Everybody enjoys it. I would say that I would probably caution against taking young babies, because depending on the personality of your baby, they may or may not like going into the It's a Small World nursery on the cruise ship, and so it may be difficult, this was the case for us, to have any time apart from your baby when you're on the cruise. But the cruise line is the only one of these three really that gives you the opportunity anymore to have your kids go somewhere and be taken care of, and you can go do something as adults on your own without them. There used to be kids clubs and things at the different resorts at Walt Disney World, but I don't know if any of them have reopened since the pandemic. So it can be challenging if you have small kids and you want to be able to separate from your kids at the theme parks. Unless your kids are older and they're teenagers and they can go off and do things on their own, you're really all going to have to be together all the time at either Disneyland or Walt Disney World. But on the ships, they have very well-trained staff in the kids clubs, and you can really feel secure and comfortable leaving your kids in the kids clubs. And depending on the personality of your child, they may really enjoy that. There's everything from the It's a Small World nursery, from babies all the way up to teenagers to 18 years old. So there's different clubs for each age group. You will see a lot of adults on Disney Cruise Line because most of the year kids are in school, and it can be challenging for families to take their kids out of school to do any of these trips. But you won't see the crowdedness on a ship that you'll see with the increase in crowds in the theme parks in summer and during school holidays, because a ship has a limited capacity. They can only fit so many people on a ship. So once they've reached that capacity, it's never going to be more than that. The only thing you're ever really going to wait in line for on a Disney Cruise Line ship is meeting the characters. And you're still going to wait in line a much shorter time on the cruise ships than you are in the parks. Now let's talk really quick to wrap things up here about cost. How much these cost really depends on a lot of factors. It's impossible to say which one is the most or least expensive because it depends on so many things. It depends on your accommodation. On land, are you staying at an offsite hotel? Or are you staying at an on-site Disney resort? On the ship, are you getting an inside cabin, an ocean view cabin with a window, a balcony, a suite, concierge? How long are you going for? Are you going for 2 days, 5 days, 2 weeks? The longer you go, the more it's going to cost. Now on a Disney cruise, all of your food and meals and everything are included, but you're going to have to budget for food at Disneyland and at Walt Disney World. I have found when it comes to food, I tend to spend less at Disneyland than I do at Walt Disney World, and that goes back to the fact that there tends to be more focus on counter service dining at Disneyland and more focus on table service dining at Walt Disney World. You don't have to do that. You could just eat at counter service restaurants at Walt Disney World too, but that's just kind of a generalization. Also, just the fact that Disney World is so much bigger than Disneyland, you really automatically have to stay there longer. So no matter what, I really kind of in general find that a trip to Walt Disney World is going to be more expensive than a trip to Disneyland because of how much bigger it is and how much more time it takes to experience. I hope that this video was helpful to you. I know I included a lot of information, but I really thought this was a great opportunity, since we visited all 3 of these this year, to kind of compare them for you and give you as much information as I could think of to help you understand the differences between these 3 Disney experiences. If you have any questions, please leave those in the comments below. I always answer everybody's questions in the comments. Be sure to go back and look at my playlists from each of these trips that we took, so that you can see the daily vlogs and everything from each of these experiences. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video today, folks. If you liked it, please give me a thumbs up down below. Have a great day and safe travels.